Hey there, welcome to episode 103 of the FFS Talk audio program. I'm your host, Dan Hugo. The time is 1:41 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here in Greater Vegas. A little bit later than normal on this Thursday, November 13th, 2025. We publish FFS Talk on Thursdays, so I think this still counts. Today's title and topic, complexity. This is something that I've brought up in other episodes as part of the other title and topic for that particular episode, but this time we'll just look at complexity, see what we think. I don't know if this will be a slightly shorter episode, but as always, our episodes are intended to be the beginnings of eventual conversations. Episode 103 makes a streak of 103 episodes of no guest, so audio essay monologues. The FFS Talk audio program is intended, though, to be something of a debate or a conversation or argument as we strive to decide, or to at least discuss, what works, what does not, and what we might do about it. I know you have an opinion on each and everything that I've brought up. I guess everybody agrees with me. I don't know. FFS Talk, by the way, if you're not familiar, FFS is an abbreviation for an expression that I've heard many Irish people use many times. If you are not familiar with that expression, you should hang out in Ireland more, or at least spend time with more Irish people. I think the last time I looked, there were some 55 million Irish people, or people claiming to have Irish, or to be of Irish descent in the United States. The population of Ireland itself on the island is, I think, 4.5 million people, somewhere in there. So maybe just wander around the United States and visit a pub now and then. Either way, the intent of this program is, again, to discuss with more than one person what works, what doesn't, and what we might do about it moving forward. So today, complexity. What do we got? Hopefully, wherever you found this audio program, and there are a couple of places, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes, including a brief summary of 2 sentences, which I will read. They're not long. The links for today's episode, they're just the same 2 links. I was going to put a link to the complexity versus complication. You can find several articles on that, but I've done that previously. If you're a good listener, you will have heard those episodes. If you're new to the program, you can flip through some of the episodes and get those links. But you can also just look up complexity versus complication versus complexity. There you go. You'll find many articles on the topic. You can look up what complication is and what complexity is and compare them yourself. Or I can just explain it as the first item in today's episode. So with that in mind, let's get on with it on this Thursday early afternoon. The weather is not great, so I'll tell you right now, I hope my voice makes it all the way through. It's all over the place. If you listen to the different episodes of my audio programs this week, I'm sure you'll pick up on the variation. It's a little bit annoying, but that's how I roll. Annoying. The summary of today's episode is simplicity more and more difficult to find. Look around. We depend more and more on things that are less and less transparent, more difficult to repair, and probably doing something to us we would rather they did not do. Complex things. The links for today's episode, as usual, the ffstalk.com homepage, ffstalk.com, no spaces, just the one period, ffstalk.com. I am moving towards the Posse model, the publish on your own site, syndicate elsewhere. So eventually I will self-host all of my content, with Spotify being the secondary. So right now there's a Spotify player on the site. There isn't much more. This is all work in progress. I've talked about this in previous episodes of all of my different programs, so it's the way it is. But you will find a link to the Spotify for Creators profile page so far. So for the time being, you can still find content on Spotify, and that will be the secondary. So that will not go away by my choice, but I would like to be the primary point of publication for my various productions. So we're moving in that direction. And in the meantime, you can find links to all of these things, the YouTube links and websites and Spotify links and all sorts of things on the profile page linking everything. I've had my buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo profile page for many years now. Does what it's supposed to do. You don't have to spend any money there. There are links to all of my audio programs. There are links to my various projects. There's a little bit of biographical information. We publish the Buy Me an Update audio program first on Buy Me a Coffee, hence the name. buymeacoffee.com/danhugo/posts every Monday morning. A quick rundown of the previous week's audio programs and news and announcements as appropriate. 5 minutes or less. How can you go wrong? Don't forget Coffee Solo still publishes whenever. No particular topic, no particular time, no particular frequency. Buy Me an Update and Coffee Solo can also be found on my personal homepage, danhugo.com. And again, all websites subject to visual improvement over time. I have too many things to do. So with all that in mind, let us begin. So complication versus complexity. Again, this is something I've touched on a few times. These are related, but not quite the same. Something is said to be complicated if it requires many steps to implement, many items to combine in intricate ways under specific conditions, or in general, a lot of stuff. But doable. Something is complex if there is a lack of total system awareness, such as how to make another one of whatever the thing is, the exact theory of operation, like how does it actually work, models of interaction within a system of the complex thing and other things, like how does this complex thing work with other complex things or even other non-complex things. The three-body problem, how does that work? So there are a lot of examples of complex things in nature, especially out in space. We're still always learning as a humanity in the pursuit of knowledge. It's a thing. I'm into it. Hopefully you are too. But there are complex things out there that we don't totally understand. And there are a lot of complicated things that some people understand, but they look complex. So by way of example, and I just thought of this yesterday, I was like, oh, maybe that will make this clear. I don't know if you're not grokking the difference. So by way of example, let's take the infamous KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, now I think legally renamed to KFC. The recipe, made of some unknown collection of 11 herbs and spices, kept secret for time immemorial. Nobody knew what it was, except for, I can't remember if it was like 2 people knew the entire recipe, but everybody else only had one ingredient or 2, and they kept everybody up. They didn't know who each other. It was very, very cloak and dagger or spy versus spy kind of thing. Sounds like fun. Let us ignore the possibilities of various modern chemical analysis tools and the possibilities of herbal deconstruction. And in general, we have a variety of tools and methods now that humanity continues to develop to move complexity to complication. In other words, as we understand more and more of our world, it becomes harder and harder to hide the recipe for Kentucky Fried Chicken. So let's pretend we are sometime in the past. So KFC in the 70s or, a while ago. They weren't KFC in the 70s. They were Kentucky Fried Chicken. Anyway, you get the idea. So for the casual customer, you and me, the restaurant competitor, perhaps the recipe is complex with no way to confirm the accuracy of a best guess at which 11 herbs and spices make KFC what it is. Only assumptions and possibilities. I actually saw Matt Pat and his wife do towards the end of their own participation in the food theory YouTube show, they tried to come up with their own version, and they compared some other theoretical KFC knockoff recipes. So they did a little taste test. It was interesting, but you can never really be sure if you don't know if the recipe is complex to the outside world. For those few with the knowledge of the actual 11 herbs and spices, it might be more than 2, don't know. The recipe, if I can spell correctly, not the receipt. The recipe is complicated, with some of the ingredients maybe more difficult to obtain, the order of mixing a critical factor perhaps, some steps of heating and cooling perhaps to ensure incremental outcomes that eventually lead to the famous flavors. Whatever the case may be, however complicated the actual recipe and the actual ingredients list and what you do to prepare this secret complexity, they know what it is. So to them, it's not complex. They know how it works. They know what goes into it. They know how to make it. It might require 1,000 steps. It might be extremely complicated, but they do know how to get from nothing to the correct KFC 11 herbs and spices fried chicken recipe. So to the outside world, complex, can never really be sure. Don't know exactly. Some information, not total information. Internally, if you know how it works, complicated. It could be complicated in that you do 11 steps. It could be 1,000. But complicated means you do know how it works. It's just, you have to follow a path to get from A to B or A to Z or whatever it is. So in the general case, someone with a workable level of subject matter expertise maybe understands how some process works, how some system is constructed, and may be able to tackle complication with the time and effort and eventually comprehension. So they get it. However, we can still have situations, and in fact often do, where a complicated system is obscured to maintain secrecy of intellectual property, for example, so that it is complex even to those who might know enough to, know how it works. So probably, actually, large language models are a reasonable example of this. The math behind large LLMs is not complex to the people who know how it works, but the way the resulting models work so far is complex. So even the people that are doing the design and research around large language model development and training and so on, if you ask, they'll tell you, we're not entirely sure how these things work. I mean, mathematically, okay, but why do they hallucinate? That one has some possible answers, I think, over the recent months. But, what happens when this kind of training data is used? What happens when you leave things out? What happens when you, what do they call it? When you tune a model, the forgetfulness and all. There's all kinds of stuff that is still complex about these large language models that are taking away jobs and wrecking the economy. But anyway, I'm sure everything will be fine. Everything will be fine. So, but yeah, there can be things where we know, you could look at maybe cryptography. If you can know exactly how the Diffie-Hellman key exchange works and how group theory works with large numbers, with prime factorization of very large numbers and so on. But the result of encryption is complex because you can not never. It's a very, very hard problem to to decrypt encrypted information if it's encrypted in a secure way. The one-time pad, arguably, still the best way to go. So you can never really. The math is super simple. XOR, exclusive or some bits. The results complex beyond decryption unless you know what the key is. Theoretically, anyway. I mean, I guess if you brute force it, if you can try every combination possible and try to determine which ones make sense, that's not totally practical with one-time pad because every solution is possible, perhaps. You'd have to get into grammar analysis. And anyway, the point is there are things that are complicated, but their outcomes or the results can still be complex, even for people who do know how they work. And certainly for the casual layperson, a truly complicated system can appear to be complex beyond understanding in general. We all encounter that all the time. So that's what we're talking about, sort of. I don't mean to get too complex, but so what does work? In our modern world, we have a lot of complicated stuff going on. For those who are, let me take out the word who. For those designing and building and deploying and whatnot, a lot of it really is complex for the rest of us. But we get what we want in exchange for not knowing quite how we're getting it. For the casual internet user, for example, the attention economy and use of personal information and historical browsing data and whatnot to figure out who exactly wants to do what and who wants to spend money on this or that, how they're going to vote, etc., etc. The algorithm and its various secrets, all complex from the outside, from the casual user perspective, beyond comprehension. But we get our For You pages and recommended purchases and news feeds that feed our need to stay glued to our screens thanks to this complexity. So it's a win-win, maybe. The third of Arthur C. Clarke's 3 laws, quote, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, unquote, is underscoring the value of complexity not only in the marketplace for business purposes, but for the attraction to these shiny new things shrouded in mystery and wonder by the masses. This probably seems to lean into pure tech. I mean, advanced technology. It's right in the name there, or in the law, in the text of the law, in fact, like mobile and wireless and now AI. But technology is now related in so many ways to pure science and scientific advances. You could argue that technology and science have always kind of gone together, but nowadays you can do so much faster with these various scientific advancements. You can have artificial intelligence or machine learning models, more analytical perhaps, that are looking at protein folding. They're looking at antenna design for more optimal signaling, radio signaling, wireless. But just a host of things that are coming out of the analysis of data. One of the ones in the medical field is the analysis of X-ray images to locate tumors, cancerous perhaps, much earlier because of the finer grained analysis once they have a classification model in place. So there are some good things coming. Pure technology is driving advancements in science, which can lead to advancements in quality of life and agriculture. Pure science and pure scientific advancements like agriculture and immunology and weather forecasting and reading those X-rays. So medical diagnosis, so many more things we probably rarely think about when they are just operating normally. They just keep getting better. Like, oh wow, look at that. Except for Amazon with their smart speaker products, they haven't figured this out yet. I have to be careful because one of them will come on and make some noise, and it's super annoying because they haven't figured out context. And then there is the magic of something that we simply accept and enjoy without having the slightest notion of what goes on making this something possible. Maybe it is in those 11 herbs and spices and amazing and unusual food and drink in general. Like, I don't need to know how this person whipped up this delightful dinner. It's amazing, and as long as they know, I don't need to. The work of card mechanics and magicians who show us the impossible regularly. How did you get my card out of that deck? How did you make that handkerchief disappear and reappear in the deck of cards? Whatever it is. They're to them a complicated collection of actions that distract and entertain. To us, we'll just settle with it being magic. Wonder and amazement may first have been discovered back in 1977 with the release of Star Wars when it comes to movies and TV or any movie or TV production that can press technology and creativity to their limits and leave us wanting to see it again and again. And the list goes on and on. Sometimes complexity is part of the fun. So complexity is not always a bad thing. We get something for it and we might be entertained by it and impressed. Ooh, but there are some things that do not work. The most obvious occasion where complexity can really be an undoing on small or large scale is when the things we depend on simply stop working. This could be a plain old human engineered bug, like the Amazon Web Services failure a few weeks ago in their US East 1 region. Everything on the internet just suddenly stopped working. Those are fun times. Which was blamed on DNS, the domain name service. But it was really some DNS management tools that they at Amazon Web Services wrote that did not do the right thing under a particular set of circumstances that occurred. And so there was a cascading failure that disabled a lot of things that we take for granted. I really need to have this work. And suddenly one bad decision about some untested piece of code that was moving some DNS records or resetting them, or in this case, zeroing one out, so then it didn't get updated anymore. These are the sorts of little tiny things that can have massive results or outcomes that are complex to the general population because we have no idea what's going on. We just want it to work. Why does foodborne illness happen in a food inspection and safety system that is probably a vast and complex mystery to just about all of us, right? Like, have you ever had somebody like, oh, there's an outbreak of E. coli, or there's an outbreak of botulism, or there's an outbreak of whatever it is, right? Hopefully not botulism. That's bad. E. coli is not uncommon though. Why don't we have food inspectors? Isn't there some sort of a process that I don't understand that's supposed to make sure my food is safe? But yet right now I'm in my restroom trying to understand all of this while I'm losing weight right now. You know what I mean? So these are complex systems that we really only appreciate fully when they stop working, and they maybe lead to real serious problems, financial, health, or otherwise. As the U.S. comes out of the longest government shutdown in the history of the Republic, this is happening this week. I think the vote in the House was on the 12th, so yesterday. The Senate, various machinations, and a lot of headlines and hand wringing and who knows what. But the longest government shutdown in history, the history of the Republic, came to an end, or is coming to an end. I believe the bill was actually signed into law by that one guy. Surely there is still a giant gap between this happening and the populace feeling the pain and suffering and injury and various large and small businesses suffering financial impact with people not getting paid, and so money not flowing through the economy, SNAP payments or paychecks or anything, just a host of things. The complex system of the U.S. federal government suddenly not working. And the lasting effects, which have yet to be analyzed and felt. Fix this one little typo here. The lasting effects. So yeah, who knows? Who knows how long it will take air traffic controllers to get back and get thousands of canceled flights. There's a backlog now of passengers. I mean, there's all sorts of things that will take a moment. And these are being complex systems that will not be very clear. And in the face of all this, at the same time, how about that? The final penny was minted. The penny press has ended. There will be no more pennies injected into our economy. Now, I think I saw something that there are 300 million, give or take, pennies in circulation wherever on the planet they are. But now that pennies have stopped, that they're no longer being produced, they're no longer being minted, the cost to make a penny is greater than one penny. The use of the penny, it moves through the economy for however many years. It probably lasts for decades. Or the penny was first minted 230 years ago, so maybe there are pennies from 230 years ago still around, probably in a collector's coin purse or something. But, sorry, there's an Alexa. Alexa devices are horrible. So 230 years ago, pennies. So pennies are now coming to a close. So at the same time, the government shut down and restarting and controversy and so on, there are now signs posted in most retail windows that pennies may no longer be available as the penny shortage begins. So people are going to start hanging on to pennies, or they'll save them for posterity, who knows what. So the penny has now become the most ridiculous complication. It's probably not complex. We're just not making pennies anymore, but it's seemingly bad timing and an unnecessarily additional component to the overall complexity. How about that? So yeah, so we're still going to try to figure out what happens. There are the lasting effects which have yet to be analyzed and felt, and possibly more interesting or more important or more relevant for today's topic. The mechanisms that led to the shutdown and the chaos that led to the shutdown ending are probably beyond the casual understanding of the casual person. Like, I don't care. I just want things to get back to, I want to get on my flight. I want to get, whatever the case may be. There is always some sort of preference expressed to elect people who are not insiders, who are not part of the system, and worse. But what does that really mean? The U.S. government is, top to bottom, a truly complex thing that ultimately serves people it affects in very different and not always good ways. And if you ask one person in one part of our federal government, they may have not the slightest idea how some other part works, even though the part that they work with or in or are part of may actually depend on the other part. We call these black boxes. We just don't understand how they work inside. So they're complex elements of our daily work if we work in the government. I do not. So why is this like this? Who can say, really? It's a system that continues to get more and more complicated, thus appearing complex even to those who are working in it, with it, because of it. Crazy. Have you noticed that human processes can be so complicated for those who do not know that even when the people that seem to know what's going on, when they try to explain these things to we, the lay people, so that we might have some chance of comprehending a complex process or scenario enough to form some opinion, they sometimes come up with different explanations. They might be politically driven. They may be agenda driven. They may really want you to subscribe to their YouTube channel, so they give you a pleasing explanation. Who knows? Many complex motivations, like a puzzle versus a mystery. And I actually like this dichotomy also. And I want to say it was Malcolm Gladwell from whom I first heard these two terms and their definitions or use. So humanish systems like law and bureaucracy and social norms, so I said human-ish, and a host of other things that are a product of negotiated human interaction tend to become complex as special cases and attitude changes add up and time passes, with some memories fading as to the why behind some of the choices and constructions. So that's more of a mystery, right? Even as you unfold new findings in the pursuit of solving a mystery, some of the clues may lead you in the wrong direction. Not everything makes sense. Some things are intentionally misleading. Some things are poorly thought out. On the other hand, complex science and technology probably more often has a progression towards complication as we understand more and more with time. So things that we do not understand become understandable, even though they're complicated. And this tends to be more like a puzzle. The puzzle being, if you can imagine a jigsaw puzzle, for example, every time you put a piece in the correct place in a puzzle, you are moving towards eventually putting in the final piece and thus completion of the puzzle. A mystery may never be solved, even if you get evidence and potential solutions every day. So there are some finer points. Pardon me. For the most part, the casual person living their life day to day benefits, as far as they know, from systems that are complex to them. You may have no idea what a nonce is or how a hashing algorithm works with the blockchain, but if you can invest in Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency, great. Maybe you benefit financially over time, or you enjoy the thrill of rapidly changing currency that is not backed by anything tangible. The same is true of money in general. I would say, in my opinion, that's true. Who really knows how money supplies work? Why your fiat currency backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government, for example, is possibly more sensible than that cryptocurrency investment, for now anyway. How banking works with fractional reserves and so on. Sterilizing immunity is not a requirement for a vaccine to be useful or to be even called a vaccine. Don't listen to Joe Rogan. The pandemic will go down in history as possibly the most and least sensible time in a population scale that we can ever possibly conceive of, I think. So vaccines. Vaccines is a very controversial topic. Potassium is a national security element. Uranium, potassium, we make sure we have adequate supplies of both. As found in various agriculture items, we absolutely require at scale. Think food supply. But why? Why is this? The surface not yet scratched. So there's a lot of stuff that because they are complex to us, we don't understand the implications. There's a theory. I think it's potash. Ukraine has a substantial supply of naturally occurring potash. Potash is a substantially critical element of food production, growing food. So potassium compounds. Potassium is found in guano. So there's like an old policy or statute or whatever it is for the U.S. federal government will claim an island that is found to have a lot of birds landing there and depositing their guano. Guano is a rich source of potassium compounds useful for fertilizing the ground and thus ensuring a stable food supply or availability of. So complicated agriculture can be complicated or constipated. Complicated systems, complex to the general population. We don't know how they work. We just, we got what we need and who knows. Complexity is scary, or at least off-putting. I think a lot of people would agree with that. The way many people do not like math or feel they are not good at math can apply to many things that rely on subject matter expertise or some level of proficiency with base principles, first principles perhaps, in math or science or whatever else. So oftentimes we find comfort in ignorance with a layer of utility sprinkled on top. So in other words, it works. I don't need to know how. I don't know math. I don't need to know how money works. Again, we get what we want. Do we really need to worry about how or why? Think about how often you answer no to that question. Pure complexity does exist. There are some things that defy explanation. These are often found in the exciting world of physics, like quantum and gravity and time and the origin of the universe. The biggies and the tinies. Quantum is really more about teeny tiny things. These are, you can only experiment so much. Coming up with the experiments is hard. The Large Hadron Collider is not big enough. A lot of complexity is a matter of exploration and the attainment of that level of familiarity, at least, though more often actual expertise developed through academic and practical pursuit and ongoing learning and all the things nobody really wants to do, right? And most do not go that way. Most do not spend their time learning and learning more and deep dives into a particular topic. Just give me my taco. I don't need to know where the lettuce and the cheese came from. And the meat, of course, or meatless tacos. They exist. Look around. Do you know how the things around you actually work and why, how they come to you? We talked about this in a previous episode with personal supply chains, for example. So yeah, complexity is not something that everybody really wants to deal with. We don't need to know why. Ours is not to reason why. Ours is but to eat this pie. What we might do about all of this, the typical ending to the FFS Talks program. Is complexity itself a complex problem? Sometimes yes, often more complicated than complex. Those complicated complexities are usually a matter of taking the time to, as the saying goes nowadays, do your own research. Another typo there. I do my own research. I watch YouTube videos. Books, articles, blog posts, research papers, YouTube videos, they make a part of the overall landscape of research or available information to take from. There are plenty of resources out there attempting to explain a great many things. And as I always say, these are great places to begin the exploration, but getting beyond complexity and into the complicated, interesting stuff is not a one and done. Often some base intellectual curiosity and some aha moments will help continued learning and understanding. So you can watch one YouTube video and believe that you understand everything. Almost certainly quite the opposite will be true. But certainly some YouTube videos and YouTube creators can be a part of an overall learning arc where you can convert some complex thing that you didn't really understand into a complicated set of supply chains and ingredients and processes and movements and marketplaces and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, doing your own research. That's one thing that you can do is try or strive to understand the complex and make them complicated to you. Those who design and develop complicated things could make an effort to explain complexity to their users, their customers, to people who depend on these things. So I make something that's very complicated, but to my customer, it appears complex. I could try to change that. Intellectual property has real financial value in the modern world, though. So this is a difficult ask, even impossible an ask. But basic transparency would go nicely with the previous point so that people could actually learn. We could do all of our own research from primary sources and authoritative information rather than having to listen to somebody on YouTube explain how a thing works. We can have the people or the company, people from the company that designs and builds the thing tell us directly, here's how it works. This is unlikely, but this would help. And this is where open source comes in really handy. Open source large language models, the Llama model from Facebook sort of set the tone for this. There are a lot of open source models. Where they get their training data from is a different story sometimes, but generally speaking, if you can peel back the covers and look at how a large language model does its computation, that can be educational. It goes some way in learning how they actually work and maybe discovering sometimes when they do not, maybe. So it would be good. It would be useful. It would be arguably better if complicated systems were explained from the people who design and build them authoritatively, so that some of the complexity can be whittled away at least by those who are curious, who want to take the time. And it would go really, really well with people who are doing their own research. So point 1 and point 2, kind of two great tastes, right? Finally, we're finally getting here. My clock says 37 minutes before silence truncation. Finally, the age of AI is upon us, as we probably are tired of hearing. Should not some AI tool be able to explain away some of the complexity? Well, today we have large language models that train on the web and which can go seek out the same information you might find yourself. So RAG, which I'm totally spacing on what that means, but it's, I can't remember what that, AI RAG, retrieval augmented generation. There you go. So your model can go out and like, oh, I haven't been trained with any data from today's news. I'll go look at today's news real quick. I'll go check on Reddit because how can I get misinformed from Reddit, etc. Right? So they're going to go find or train on or acquire and tune with information that you can get also. They'll just do it at scale. So are these models doing a deep dive analysis? Are they attempting to understand complex systems to reach a complicated explanation that they can then phrase in ways that make the complications easier to understand and learn from? Well, that depends on how much marketing you believe. They're building up a response based on statistics, the word vectors, the what do they call it? The parameter space. They're basically figuring out what you're asking or what you're describing, and they're coming up with a response that seems to statistically make sense. And yeah, there can be some the transformer models and the processes that shape where the text goes, and the distributed experts. What is it? Multiple experts. So some models will be trained differently, and they can try to come up with a sort of a blended response. So there are subtleties involved, but it's really, there's no thinking. Your artificial intelligence model doesn't really care whether it's right or wrong, for example. The reward function is questionable. So how much marketing do you believe? So in the future, reasoning models with more cognition and less statistical word vector construction might think outside the box and help to bridge the complexity gap, and in fact may be able to create complicated things. For now, while the math behind LLMs, again, large language models, is actually complicated and not complex, the way LLMs actually think, in quotes, big giant quotes, is indeed complex. Who knows if they're telling you what is close to correct, if it's anywhere near close to correct, if you don't already know the answer. Every time I hear someone say, I asked ChatGPT to give me financial advice, to do some calculations, to tell me how much of this over what period of time. Stick to the first method, do your own research, and then hope for the second method where there's more transparency and you can actually get authoritative descriptions and explanations of system complication, and try to get through the complexity a little bit more quickly, or at least with better information. Always learn and continue learning, and that is the only true way to make sense of any of this stuff. So there you go. There are some thoughts on complexity for today. You may have some opinions or thoughts or arguments. That would be great. My goal for 2026 will be to begin engaging conversation in this space. So maybe there's a topic amongst the previous 103 that are interesting. This one and the previous, there is an episode 0, so I'll let you do the off by one error math. But yeah, someday at some point we'll get some conversation going on any of these topics, and we'll see. You already know what I think. You know what I thought at the time anyway. We can all evolve our thinking and our understanding, because sometimes complex things become complicated. And that's where we're going to end it for today. So happy Thursday on this November 13th, 2025, whether you're in Vegas or wherever else. Take care. Bye-bye.